Hello and welcome to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Guan Xin in Beijing. Coming up in the program. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has lodged solemn representations over statements on the Taiwan issue by G7 foreign ministers and EU foreign policy chief. In our new series, Multinational Companies in China, we talk to foreign companies and entrepreneurs about their views on China's future economic development. And more countries have hiked interest rates amid surging inflation, with UK and Brazil being the latest. A check first on how Chinese mainland equities wrap up the week. Shares in both Shanghai and Shenzhen saw some gains. The Shanghai Composite Index rose 1.2% and the Shenzhen Component Index by about 1.7%. We'll get you fully updated on the Chinese mainland markets later in our program. In the meantime, here's how regional markets performed and how Wall Street closed out overnight. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has lodged solemn representations to relevant European countries and EU envoys over statements on Taiwan issued by G7 foreign ministers and EU foreign policy chief. Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister Deng Li says the statements were a political provocation which distorted the facts and interfered in China's internal affairs. Deng says the One China principle is a political foundation for China's exchanges with other countries and a red line that cannot be crossed. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said earlier that the G7 statement distorted the facts surrounding the situation over Taiwan.
这个声明 中方坚决地反对。
China firmly opposed this statement because it confuses black and white, confuses right and wrong, and blatantly whitewashes the infringer. It makes groundless accusations against the defenders and exerts political pressure on them. Where is the justice? What are the basic norms of international relations? Non-interference in internal affairs is the most basic principle for maintaining peace and stability in our world. We should not allow the law of the jungle to dominate our state-to-state relations. I believe this statement is just a piece of paper of no significance.
我相信这个所谓的机器声明只是废纸一张。
And China also summoned the Japanese ambassador to China, Hideo Terumi, earlier, saying that Tokyo's involvement in the statements made by G7 and EU violated basic international principles as well as the four China-Japan political documents. The Chinese mainland has been the largest export and investment destination for companies from the Taiwan island. According to China's General Administration of Customs, cross-strait trade volume has more than doubled in the last 10 years from $160 billion in 2011 to $328 billion in 2021. Trade with the Chinese mainland accounted for 33% of Taiwan's total foreign trade last year. Investments by Taiwan businesses on the Chinese mainland has also increased steadily. According to the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, by the end of 2021, Taiwan investors had invested in nearly 124,000 projects on the Chinese mainland, with an actual investment of more than $71 billion. The Taiwan situation was also a hot topic for discussions at the ongoing East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers meeting in Phnom Penh. Meanwhile, Southeast Asia's regional bloc, ASEAN, reaffirmed its support to the One China policy. It will also promote peaceful and stable environment for development of the region, according to a joint communique issued on Friday. Our correspondent Ryan Melsler has the details.
It's essentially supposed to be more of an economic forum, really, and it really comprises the members of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the world's biggest free trade deal, plus India, the US, and Russia, with India having dropped out of RCEP at the last minute. Now, this is the first major ASEAN meeting since RCEP came into effect. So the countries of the RCEP agreement will definitely be wanting to see progress on that, see it to help boost trade even further among the countries that belong to that agreement, and see it help that the RCEP will help to boost economic recovery. Now, once the meeting got underway, actually Wang Yi and the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov broke away from the meeting and held bilateral talks. Wang Yi has held numerous bilateral talks during this meeting. Last evening, lengthy talks with Singapore, Thailand, and Sri Lanka. More talks expected later today. Now, following on from the East Asia Summit will be the ASEAN Regional Forum, which is an even bigger grouping. It adds several more countries, including unusual participants such as the DPRK. So it's one of the rare forums where you have both halves of the Korean Peninsula together. The EU is there, Russia, the US, India, all the ASEAN countries, China as well, of course. Now, this tends to focus more on geopolitical issues, and given what's happening in the world today with the Ukraine conflict, the situation in Myanmar deteriorating, of course, the latest tensions over the Taiwan Straits and the relations between the US and China. Obviously, these geopolitical tensions are going to be high on the agenda and come to the fore. It's going to be unusual, of course, to have Russia and the US sitting across from each other, if they do in fact do so. But this is an opportunity for dialogue. That's what ASEAN tries to promote through these sideline forums such as the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Regional Forum. Bring these countries that don't see eye to eye together, try to find some common ground. But the tensions are running very high here with the statement from the G7 having aggravated China yesterday, and obviously tensions between China, the US, Russia, EU and Russia. It's a very tense situation here, but we hope some progress will be made and that calmer heads will prevail and all parties will seek some kind of common ground through these forums today.
Meanwhile, Taiwan has been expanding business activities in the Southeast Asian markets in recent years. According to Taiwan media, the region's exports to the 10 ASEAN member states rose 32% to a record $70.24 billion in 2021. Further analysis of the data shows that Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines accounted for 98.5% of Taiwan's total outgoing shipments to the region, with the major exports being electronic components and parts and integrated and printed circuits. Foreign ministers from Southeast Asian countries, as well as China, the US, Russia, and Japan, are attending the East Asia Summit in the Cambodian capital Phnom Penh on Friday. Meanwhile, the ASEAN has warned of miscalculation on Taiwan Strait. For more discussions, let's bring in John Gong, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the University of International Business and Economics, Israel. Thank you for joining us, Professor Gong. So how important is Taiwan in the global supply chains and the regional economy?
Well, Taiwan's economy is not that big in overall scheme of things, but it's one sector that's very important, holds a critical role in the global supply network. That is with respect to the semiconductor industry, especially these high-end, more sophisticated chips. There's one company, as we all know, TSMC, holds about over 90%, reportedly, 90% of the market share in that particular market segment. So this is a very important company in the entire global supply chain. So obviously, any tensions, any prospect of things go out of control will certainly have an implication global-wise. So I think that's where this industry is very important at this point.
As you mentioned, it's a small economy, so it's pretty much export-oriented. How will the Pelosi visit and subsequent geopolitical tensions affect trade and economy for Taiwan and Asia-Pacific region?
Certainly, Taiwan's trade with China is going to be impacted. And that's a very huge percentage out of the total trade with Taiwan. Mainland China and Taiwan trade accounts for around 30%, over 30% of the Taiwan's total trade. So that's a very significant piece. We're already seeing that it's being impacted. China has imposed sanctions to some extent. Take measures to reduce exports as well as actually imports from Taiwan. Taiwan is starting to feel that it cannot go on like this with the expectation that things are not going to change. Things will change. There will be consequences. And I think what's significant in this case is that I think Nancy Pelosi's visit probably is a watershed event in the sense that the entire mainland China's Taiwan policy is going to go through a process of some soul searching. I'm pretty sure there will be adjustments, and clearly, in my view, the past policy hasn't been working, and it calls for a readjustment. And I think that this readjustment is not going to bode well for Taiwan's economy.
And not well for the regional economy as well. The ASEAN has warned of miscalculation over the Taiwan issue. What does the statement mean?
Well, it doesn't say exactly miscalculation on whose part, right? It doesn't say exactly. Well, I mean, there's three parties involved here. There's the mainland China, there's the Taiwan, and there's also the United States. I think probably this statement applies a little bit to all of these parties. But in my view, this statement should apply particularly to Taiwan first and second United States. I mean, this trip is clearly under the encouragement of Taiwan. Reportedly, Taiwan has spent money to lobby Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan. So clearly, Taiwan is the party who is going to be mostly responsible for that, other than the United States, of course. So I think this miscalculation warning should be directed more towards Taipei and Washington, D.C.
Right, I totally agree with you because ASEAN has reiterated its commitment to One China principle and the visit a serious provocation to that. Given all these geopolitical tensions, what are the likely outcomes from the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting regarding promoting the stability and cooperation in the region?
Yeah, so ASEAN is still a very important partner from China's perspective, both politically, economically. And I think the statement also said very clearly that ASEAN is expected to, at least seeks to play a more active role in terms of facilitating dialogue or peace in the region, stability in the region.
Right.
So I think ASEAN can indeed play a constructive role in this. But ultimately, this is a China's domestic issue. I think the bottom line here, at the end of the day, this is a legacy coming from out of the Civil War in 1949. We finished in 1949 in China, and it's the lingering effect of that. The island is part of China, that's for sure. And I think ultimately this issue has to be resolved between people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. It's an internal matter. It regards sovereignty and territorial integrity. I also look at this G7 statement, and I think Foreign Minister Wang is absolutely right. That piece of paper should be totally rejected. It doesn't say anything. It's no impact at all. I think it would be rejected and ignored.
Well, thank you very much for your insights. And that was John Gong, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the University of International Business and Economics, Israel, for us. And now we are heading for a short break, still to come on the program. In our new series, Multinational Companies in China, we talk to foreign companies and entrepreneurs about their visions for China's future economic development. This is just in. China is imposing sanctions on U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her close family members, says China's foreign ministry. And this is in retaliation of Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, which Beijing says is in violation of the One China principle. And now let us see how equities fared on the Chinese mainland, Hong Kong and Tokyo on Friday. Guan Xin is joining us live from Shanghai with an update. Hi there, Guan Xin. Take us through the market action today.
Yes, Guan Xin. The Shanghai Composite Index edged up 1.2% by the close today, climbing back to the 3,200-point level, while the Shenzhen Component Index gained 1.7% and the small cap China Next rose 1.62%. The Star 50 Index was the star, surging more than 4%, wiping out many of the week's losses. Still, it was a hard week and all the indices ended Friday below their Monday openings. Strong gains were posted by high-growth technology stocks, including optical, electronics, and neurotechnology. Information technology companies were leading gains across the board as U.S. legislation funding competition with Chinese chip makers stoked expectations of more domestic support for local firms, leading to presumptions that their market share is set to rise in the near future. As subgate tracking semiconductor firms rose more than 4%, with Shenzhen China Micro Semicon jumping more than 70% on its first trading day on the market, while Tongfu Microelectronics, Changchun High-End New Technology Industries Group, and China National Software and Service Company all hit the 10% upper daily trading limit. And on the bad news side, notable losses were seen from Chongqing Chang'an and BYD Company, while shares in the coal mining sector also underperformed, with Yankuang Energy Group falling 3.6%. Investors are preparing for a key U.S. jobs data report that could guide the outlook for U.S. monetary policy amid fears that aggressive rate hikes across the globe threaten a recession. Guan Xin.
And tell us more about the markets around the region. How did they wrap up the week?
Yes, shares around the region also logged gains today, recovering some of their losses from earlier in the week. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was near flat in morning trade, but then the index ended the day 0.15% up after gaining in the prior 2 days. Traders were digesting Alibaba's U.S.-listed earnings figures amid news that its biggest foreign shareholder, Japan's SoftBank, is unloading its position. Traders also await Chinese trade data for July over the weekend. For this week, the Hang Seng Index was almost unchanged. Alibaba's Hong Kong shares dropped 2% after the company reported flat revenue growth, though fiscal first quarter earnings beat expectations, pointing to some resilience in the Chinese economy. Shares of Alibaba popped more than 4% in the previous trading session ahead of its earnings results, which were released late yesterday. And shares of tech giant Tencent sank 1.4% as the firm is eyeing a bigger Ubisoft stake. The Hang Seng Tech Index added 0.77%, and shares in chip and semiconductor sectors also advanced as SMIC added 7% and Hua Hong Semiconductor rallied nearly 13%. Gains in the industrial sector, basic materials, and real estate were offset by losses in energy, tech, and utilities. And Japanese stocks surged to a nearly 2-month high as upbeat corporate earnings helped the Nikkei benchmark index through the 28,000 psychological barrier. The good-looking earnings results brought a sense of relief to the market. Japan's Nikkei 225 index gained 0.87% by the close today, the highest since June the 9th. At least 132 of the Nikkei's constituents climbed, with Kikoman leading the gains among the Nikkei's best performers, gaining 9.25% after the food manufacturer posted a strong earnings report. Nearly all sectors advanced, with notable gains from heavyweight firms such as Nintendo, Toyota Motor, and Sony Group. Metals manufacturers also posted strong gains on upbeat quarterly results, including Nippon Steel, which jumped 8.3% after the firm forecast a 6% drop in its annual profit, way smaller than analysts had expected. That's all from me in Shanghai. Now back to you, Guan Xin, in Beijing.
Well, thank you for all that information. Now, Wang Ying for us in Shanghai. Global Business is introducing a new series focusing on foreign companies based in China. We talk to foreign companies and entrepreneurs about their visions for China's future economic development. Today, we bring you the second episode of the program on 3M Company. Despite disruptions due to recent COVID-19 outbreaks, multinational companies are confident about their long-term growth prospects in China. Several like diversified industrial products maker 3M company are not only increasing their investments in China but also focusing more on product innovation. Our Aaron Liu has more on 3M's plans in the country.
Henry Jing, president of 3M China, says that the U.S. firm has seen rapid growth in China over the past few decades. Ding, who is also a strong advocate of the local-for-local policy, says that the pandemic has not deterred the company from planning and making fresh investments in the country.
Lately, even amid the COVID-19 outbreak in Shanghai, 3M launched the $50 million investment project, which will set up a new tape production line and a new converting center at our plant in Shanghai. We expected to put it into operation in 2024. This investment will bring great value for our customer in electronic and automotive industries.
During the pandemic, 3M worked closely with the local government and made all-out efforts to mobilize resources and face production challenges to mitigate its impact on supply chains. The efforts were also part of the multinational company's efforts to help China respond to COVID-19 pandemic from all angles.
China's economy is closely connected with the global economy. Although the impact of the pandemic may continue in the short term, but the fundamentals of a resilient, high potential, and prosperous economy in China remain intact. None of the advantages that China has have gone away because of the pandemic, especially when we continue to see a booming middle-class consumer market growing vigorously.
China's improving business environment has also given 3M the confidence to develop innovative technologies and products that meet local customer needs.
The business environment for 3M has steadily improved in China. This includes significant progress on IP protection, which will facilitate market access for many products. This is not just especially important for a global innovation and a technology company like 3M, but will also benefit Chinese customers and the market as a whole. We are encouraged that China's approach to foreign investment remains positive, and we look forward to continuing to be a part of China's even more open market.
Be it infrastructure construction to manufacturing, 3M has been riding the wave of China's economic development to keep its long-term growth plans ticking. Aaron Liu, CGTN, Beijing.
Judging by official FDI numbers, China remains attractive to overseas investors in general despite pandemic disruptions. The actual use of foreign direct investment in the first 6 months jumped to nearly 22% on year to $112 billion. That's mostly driven by high-tech industries and services sector. In terms of sources, China saw the biggest increase of inbound investment from South Korea thanks to the RCEP agreement that took effect earlier this year. It's followed by the US and Germany. And more foreign investors are betting on the less developed Western regions. It came as the Chinese government kept rolling out measures to improve infrastructure and business environment there. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership between China and 14 other countries came into effect in January, creating the world's largest free trade area and accounting for over 30% of global GDP. It appears to have proved a boost for regions such as Chengdu, which recently announced trade under the deal had hit just under $400 million in the first half of this year. And Zheng Sunwu has more.
When a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, took effect in January, many enterprises in Sichuan weren't taking full advantage, according to local officials. So Chengdu Customs District took measures to help them.
In the first half of this year, we noticed many enterprises couldn't use RCEP well as they didn't understand it accurately. So we worked with Chengdu Municipal Commerce Bureau to issue a list that covers over 8,000 goods and commodities. The list can guide businesses to check for zero tariff commodities in RCEP countries easily, making trade much more efficient.
The value of trade in June alone reached $280 million, exceeding that of the past 5 months. While chemicals and the new energy industry sectors performed well, most of that trade came from the lithium battery industry.
As the largest single base of producing cathode materials for lithium batteries in the world, this company can produce 100 tons of materials this year, which are sold to domestic companies or exported to South Korea. The business volume this year is expected to surpass $2 billion, and this is thanks to Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
Since the company was founded in 2015, it has been producing cathode materials such as high nickel and lithium cobalt oxides. It produced 60 tons with a turnover of $1 billion in 2021, but welcomes the opportunities that RCEP presents to take that further.
With the rules of origin in RCEP, our South Korean customers can enjoy more favorable tax rates. The list that Chengdu Customs District made has also enabled us to fully understand the entry requirements of products in RCEP countries.
The manager says they hope to expand their exports, seeking new markets in RCEP partner countries. Meanwhile, Chengdu Customs District is determined to spread knowledge about the trade advantages under the trade agreement, so other enterprises also get to benefit. Zheng Songwu, CGTN, Sichuan Province.
To understand more about the reasons for the continued attractiveness of China to foreign investors, we're joined by Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Zhou. So why is China still an attractive destination for FDI despite a slowdown in the second quarter?
I understand that there are at least 3 reasons. One of that is that Chinese government has been sending a very clear signal that we were keeping our door open to try to reduce the barriers for the foreign investors who want to come here to China. And the second is that we know there are so many diversification in China. We have different markets, different kind of sectors and industries, which provide quite a very large range of opportunities for different kinds of enterprises. The big one, the small one, and they can also cooperate with each other to develop something new about the innovation. And third one is that we know that investment is not just like the trade activities, which is a little bit longer term. So they do not only trying to look at the short-term impact, they want to see a very long-term potentials, which China has very attractive to the foreign investors.
What sectors hold the most promise in terms of foreign investment, in your opinion?
I think that if we are trying to say the most attractive, it depends on what kind of enterprises they are. For the the most attractive one, maybe the new one, the innovative ones, like for the high tech, the manufacturing, also services. They want to do more innovation because China has a very friendly environment, and the consumers want to try new things. But also, I believe that if the companies can try to integrate the nowadays, like the agriculture or manufacturing together with the services, they can also benefit from the innovation by integration of the different resources with Chinese partnerships in this market.
Why are the less developed Western regions in China looking attractive for investors right now?
Yeah, if we look at the data, the middle and the western part of China are attracting more investment from the first half of this year. I think that maybe the reason is that there are more possibilities, which means that the middle and the western part of China, the infrastructures are not so good. Well, there are so many potentials for the enterprises to develop. Well, we know that also another factor is that the middle and the western part of China are resources rich. They have different kind of resources to provide better support for the development of the business. And I believe that when the local governments in these areas, they want to attract the investors, they want to work very hard and even harder than the eastern part of China to attract the investment and trying to provide better services for them.
Well, thank you very much for your analysis. And that was Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation in Beijing. During the first 6 months of the year, supply chains in China faced severe constraints due to the impact of external factors such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. To stabilize the supply chains, the Chinese government has introduced a series of policies and measures and that are bearing fruit, and Xu Yi reports.
Since late March, many industrial enterprises in Shenyang's Hunan district have suspended production due to disruptions in supply of raw materials. This automobile parts company is one of them.
Logistic operations have been affected by the pandemic during the past few months. Our suppliers in Changchun were not able to deliver raw materials and goods on time. The local government has taken efforts to ease the logistics issues. They have helped in production resumption and got employees in key logistics positions back to work. They are also conducting nucleic acid tests for logistics workers in a timely manner to ensure smooth goods transportation.
The government has introduced decisive measures at all levels for key enterprises. These measures have ensured smooth logistics operations for more than 20,000 industrial enterprises. Meanwhile, steps have also been taken to provide financial support for these companies to overcome difficulties.
We have provided more than 40 million yuan in subsidies in both logistics and electricity bills to enterprises. We also help them to apply for loans amounting to 330 million yuan for their daily operations.
Due to combined measures from the central and local governments, the industrial and supply chain in Hunan district has recovered steadily. Industrial activity has also reversed its downtrend. Data shows that the total industrial output value of the Hunan district increased by 10.4% on a yearly basis during the first half of the year. Fixed asset investment rose by 30%, while in some key industries it grew more than 50%. Xu Yi, CGTN.
Moving on to other business stories from China, the People's Bank of China, the central bank, Friday conducted 2 billion yuan or about $300 million of reserve repo transactions to maintain liquidity in the banking system. It offsets the 2 billion yuan of reverse repos that are set to mature today. And China's yuan edged higher on Friday, tracking a firmer official guidance rate. The central parity rate of the Chinese yuan strengthened 231 pips to 6.7 against the US dollar Friday, according to the China Foreign Exchange Trade System. Chinese carriers have reduced the fuel surcharge on domestic flights from Friday to boost sales. The maximum reduction is 60 yuan per ticket. And now we're heading for another short break still to come on the program. Brazil has raised interest rates nearly 14%, the highest level in 5 years.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
The Bank of England has raised its base interest rates by half a percentage point to 1.75%. It's the biggest rate hike since 1995 and its bank's sixth rate increase since it started increasing rate in December. The bank has predicted that the consumer price index will top 13% later this year and it will remain at very elevated levels in 2023. It also warned that the UK economy will enter a recession from the fourth quarter of this year, with GDP falling by as much as 2.1%. Brazil has raised interest rates to nearly 14%, the highest level in 5 years. And that is the 12th hike since March of last year, as Paulo Cable reports. The increase is to curb surging inflation.
The decision came as no surprise to market analysts in Brazil, as there is much concern over inflation that has climbed to nearly 11.5% in June. Interest rates hikes are the textbook strategy for central banks to fight rising consumer prices. Signs of improvement, including a reduction in unemployment and higher forecasts for GDP growth, have created more space for Brazilian authorities to increase the rate in 50 basis points, raising the benchmark lending rate to 13.75% from 13.25%. It's the 12th consecutive interest hike since March 2021, when the rates were at 2%. This economics professor believes the hike should have been steeper this time and that new increases are expected from Copom, the Monetary Policy Committee.
E eu vejo que a gente ainda vai ter muita pressão inflacionária ao longo.
I think there is still much inflationary pressure ahead to which authorities will have to respond. In my opinion, the interest rates were kept too low for too long in 2019 and 2020, and we are still feeling the impact.
There have been some signs of easing inflation due to government measures that lowered fuel prices, but this positive impact may not last for very long, as increased public spending in this election year could add to inflationary pressures. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Curitiba, Brazil.
In Europe, inflation in the Netherlands rose to 10.3% in July, exceeding the 10% mark for the first time since September 1975. Spain has also recorded its highest spike in inflation in nearly 4 decades. Petrol prices have hit record levels, with families across the country feeling the impact of rising costs. Rahul Pathak has more.
Meet the Mangual family and their 2 children. They live in an idyllic little town called El Saler, just outside of Valencia. It's a region where many tourists from all over the world come on holiday, and it's a lifestyle that most people would envy. Jose runs his own business in town close to where they live. On the surface, everything is fine, but their lives, like many similar families in Spain, have changed due to circumstances beyond their control. Inflation in June reached a 37-year high at a staggering 10.2% and is now a major concern.
We should be very worried right now. The value of money is dropping, so our cash is now worth 10% less than before. It's a really worrying situation if we can't get inflation under control.
So I'm here at the local petrol pump where the Manguals regularly fill up their cars. Now you can actually see that the prices there equivalent to around $2 per litre. Now that represents a 60% increase on the average petrol price from last year. So basically, if it cost you $50 to fill up your tank in 2021, in 2022 it'll cost you more like $80.
Changes to regular habits have had to happen fast in recent months. Electricity usage has been reduced, and the family is now more conscious about what they spend. The cost of food and beverages are now 13% higher than they were last year. That's a bigger increase than in Germany, France or Italy.
You can certainly feel the increase a lot more. Basic products have gone up by 40, 50, 60 cents all of a sudden. You feel the difference from recent times with what we now have to pay.
And more pain is on the way. The European Central Bank has raised interest rates by 0.5 percentage points, so higher payments on many mortgages and loans are set to reduce disposable income even further. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, El Saler.
Meanwhile, people in Germany are also suffering from rising costs of living. The country is reporting a sharp rise in the number of people visiting food banks. Natalie Carney reports.
There was a time when retiree Rosemary's basic pension was enough for her to get by. Not anymore.
I don't get much money. That's why I come here. Everything has become more expensive.
Sertap lost her job during COVID-19, and with a big family to feed, she had nowhere else to turn.
In today's times, there's no money, but everything is very expensive, especially when there's a big family. It's very difficult.
Young, old, German, Ukrainian. The demographics of those turning to food banks across Germany are changing. According to organizers, more people registered at this food bank in Munich over the last 6 months than have over the past 2 years.
People who used to be on the other side
donating and helping us are now coming and asking for help. And we have lots of families now. It's just not possible for a normal family just to get along.
With basic food prices up 15%, COVID-19 job losses, Ukrainian refugees, and surging energy costs, all of Germany's 962 food banks are seeing longer queues.
Inflationary prices are also having an effect on the donations that food banks across the country are receiving. Supermarkets and individuals simply have less to give away, forcing many people to change their habits to make what they do have last all that bit longer.
I'm using foods longer, especially past the expiry date, because it's still well preserved.
We buy more jars of cheap food. It might be chicken, it could be fish, because they're more suitable for us.
The German government has waived a surcharge on electricity, radically discounted public transport tickets, and provided one-off payments to each income taxpayer, all to the tune of over $30 billion. But some economists are calling for more immediately effective and long-lasting measures.
It cannot be stressed enough that we're in a dramatic social crisis that is likely to worsen in the coming months. The current relief packages do not sufficiently protect people with low incomes and need to be clever in the sense that financial transfers, giving people money, is a much better measure than making certain things cheaper.
Economists are also warning of permanently high prices for energy and food in the coming years, worrying many social aid providers.
I really need food because we're just trying from Friday to Friday to get enough for everybody.
So too are recipients.
There are noodles, tomatoes, bananas, tomato sauce, chocolate biscuits, small coffee and yogurt for about 14 days or possibly 3 weeks.
While more and more people find themselves rationing what they have, the economic conditions that have brought many to this point are far from over. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Munich, Germany.
And that would do it for this edition of Global Business on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. World Today is coming up next. Bye for now.
Hello and welcome to Weather Forecast. Sauna-like weather has become so prevalent across many portions of China in recent days. And good news is things are going to change, especially for folks in the north. But on the contrary, here you can see continue in the south. To more specific, low vortex is approaching, which will bring some wet weather conditions in the days ahead. For example, we're going to see rain chances developing in North China over to northeast over this weekend in forms of downpours and thunder showers. Be sure to keep your umbrellas handy. Temperature-wise, we're expecting to see a cooler trend, especially for folks in the blue shaded areas over the next 48 hours. In major cities like Taiyuan, Shijiazhuang over to Shenyang are going to see daily highs going from lower 30s all the way down to lower and upper 20s as we head into early next Monday or Tuesday. Down to the south, you can see daily highs in the red shaded areas, especially in major cities along the middle and lower reaches Yangtze River. We'll continue to see daily highs about 35 degrees, and major cities like Chongqing, Hefei over to Hangzhou will see around 40 degrees over the next 4 days. Be sure to stay cool. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.